Mayor, we're live.
Recording in progress.
Great. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order this session of the Tacoma Park City Council. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Stewart,
Here.
Councilmember Kovar,
Here.
Councilmember Dabala,
I'm here.
Councilmember Costick,
Here.
Councilmember Siemens,
Present.
Councilmember Smith, Councilmember Searcy,
Great. Our agenda this evening has no changes to it. Looking at our agenda moving forward, next week on Wednesday, October 20th already, we will meet at 7:30. Our voting session that evening will include a single reading ordinance authorizing use of the Housing Reserve Fund for Montgomery Housing Partnership's Hillwood Manor project. We have a resolution providing for appointments to boards and committees, and tentatively a resolution providing for appointments to the Sustainable Banking and Investment Task Force. Next week, we'll also have 3 work sessions, one updating on election planning and options, a legislative priority work session, and committee appointments. The council will not meet on Wednesday, October 27th. We'll come back again for our regular meeting on Wednesday, November 3rd at 7:30. That evening, we will have a proclamation recognizing the Chesapeake Climate Action Network and volunteers for their work removing invasive vines and protecting trees in the city. Our voting session that night is tentatively first reading ordinance regarding council compensation, a resolution providing for appointments to boards and committees, and our work session that evening will be an update on the Public Safety Task Force report. The next week on Wednesday, November 10th, regular meeting will start at 7:30. Our voting session will include tentatively second reading ordinance on council compensation, single reading ordinance awarding a contract for compensation and pay equity study, a first reading ordinance awarding a contract for organizational workforce needs and risk assessment study services. Our work session that evening will be on our presentation on the draft redistricting maps. Then on Wednesday, November 17th, we will have our regular meeting at 7:30. We'll begin with a presentation of the FY 2021 audit and a presentation of the police pension plan actuarial valuation. Our voting session that evening will include second reading ordinance awarding contract for organizational workforce needs and risk assessment study services, and a resolution providing for the City Council's winter recess. Our work session that evening will be Housing and Community Development Director update, including annual reports from the Tacoma Langley CDA and the Old Town Business Association. The council will not meet on November 24th, as is the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And then we will have a meeting on Wednesday, December 1st. This will be a joint priorities meeting with our with the City Council and our District 20 delegation. That meeting will start at 7 p.m. instead of 7:30. That will be our last meeting for the month of December, and then council will come back again and meet on January 12th. And that is our upcoming agenda items. I will now pass it over to Ms. Grinsby to talk to us and introduce our Parking Management Task Force.
Good evening. I'm Rosalind Grigsby, Community Development Manager for the City of Tacoma Park. Tonight, we're talking with the co-chairs of the Parking Management Task Force that was established by Council in 2019. The intention with the establishment of this group as a task force was that it would be a fairly short-term effort and come back to Council specifically with advice for the management of parking in the city, but also to help facilitate community input in the management of parking issues. And Council charged the task force with looking at a number of different aspects of the various configurations and permutations of parking, as well as looking at equity and equity goals and a wide variety of things, including fair, equitable, and consolidated parking management. The committee has met regularly. For a long stretch, they met every 2 weeks. And they are coming before you tonight with their final report. And joining us are Jackie Davison and Greg Gorman, the two committee co-chairs. So I will turn it over to them.
Thank you, and good evening. I don't see Mayor Kate. I don't know if she's on, but anyway, greetings to Mayor Kate, the council members, my task force colleagues, and neighbors. So I'm Jackie Davison, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the Parking Management Task Force, and Gregory Gorman, and I thank you for this opportunity in person to very briefly describe the work of the task force and our deliverables so far. So I want to start with some of the work we did very early in our existence. And I think this item is important because we received from some of the reviewers of our curb space survey that we seem to focus on Old Town Tacoma. And I just think that I want to disabuse you of that fact. And because in the beginning, we spent like the first 2 months, we were meeting 2 or 3 months, and we were meeting twice a month on informing ourselves of the broad issues faced by business communities in Tacoma Park, and the business owners, the employees, and the customers. And we invited guest speakers such as Laura Barkley, Executive Director of the Old Tacoma Business Association, and her purview is 4th Street. So we were able to ask questions on the impact of 4th Street on Old Town. And we invited Paul Grenier of the Montgomery County Housing Partners, and they provide support to the Long Branch Business League at the intersection of Piney Branch and Flower Avenue. And there are only 1 corners in Tacoma Park. And there are 5 businesses there. And we invited Kaylee Gounod, who is Executive Director of Tacoma Langley Crossroads Development. And we also invited speakers to inform us about parking enforcement and the residential parking permits and the enforcement of those. So I want to move quickly now to our draft community outreach plan, which we sent to the council. As you know, the pandemic precluded in-person community meetings, and that also made almost impossible the achievement of diversity. And that was one of the council's priorities that we took very seriously. And in fact, the mayor came to speak to the council, to speak to our task force about your efforts, the council's efforts to have more diverse task force. And from my own experience with committees in the past, diversity requires person-to-person contact. I experienced that myself here at Victory Tower when Karen Marichaux was on the staff and she came to visit Victory Tower. That's when I got involved in the Village of Tacoma Now Aging Well project. So I know flyers and all, you can post them every place. It just makes no difference. And we think our community outreach plan really has, if anything, a strong chance of achieving diversity in our community participation. And I'm just, our plan is really very detailed. So I can only just give an overview tonight. So our major tasks are, we're going to use pop-ups to reach community as part of our reaching our diverse communities. And this is in survey design. So we want to reach out to the council members, of course, to support our efforts. We're going to design materials, the flyers, the audiovisual equipment, and to have them translated into Amharic, Spanish, and Mandarin. I expect that we can get translations of all of our, materials. We include audio, visual, and we're going to do business outreach. We're going to use Zoom focus groups. And as our, to reach out to the communities. There's the data collection, and we're going to have the analysis, of course, of all of the materials we collect. Now, our sample size, our sample methodology, I think is, what can I say, ensures inclusivity of all of our stakeholders and the different demographic populations that we want to reach. And we're going to have, for example, we're going to have the automobile owners, the handicapped, those who are disabled, renters, those who speak language other than English at home, seniors. And so it's very detailed, and I think our statistical methods will ensure diversity. We intend to get feedback on our ideas, and we also intend to get ideas from the community and from the different stakeholders. So I think I have covered everything. So anyway, I think that's it. And then we end with a very, very detailed flow chart. And you have this, the council has this community development outreach. So, if you have any questions even later, we are willing to respond. So I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay, I'll turn over to me. Thanks, Jackie. So I'm Greg Gorman, Ward 1, the co-chair with Jackie for this much longer than expected task force run. So as Jackie said, we had high hopes and a very detailed plan for an inclusive community outreach, which was one of our charges. And in fits and starts, we thought we could do components of it. But in the end, we have decided, almost like a hung jury, that we cannot do it in the current state. So we have the plans. I think it was oversampled to reflect non-car owners, non-single dwelling homeowners, non-Ward 1, frankly. But we don't feel we can do it right, and better not to do it or do it later than do it wrong and do it that way. That being said, we did come up with recommendations on how to use shared curb space and recommendations for the staff and city to consider. It was not just the task members themselves, as residents of the city, as Jackie has said. We talked to a diverse group, including city staff, folks from lots of other business associations, talked to employees, informally of Tacoma Park businesses. And if anything, to talk about the very first topic that Jackie mentioned, we on purpose overcompensated not to focus on Ward 1 and Old Town, because I think that was the bias to do such a thing. So we have a group of recommendations. We also leaned heavily on the recommendations from the Sabra consultants from several years ago. We talked to other cities, including Hyattsville, and looked at the materials from other cities with progressive parking policies and curb space policies around the country. So we don't think they're for naught, even though we have not been able to do community engagement. And we don't recommend that you just throw them away because we couldn't meet the charge of community engagement. I'm not going to go through the recommendations. You can read them at your leisure or bring them to staff. They focus on residential parking permit reform. They focus on parking meters, and then another group focuses on non-car use or non-car owned car use of our shared curb space. So there's three categories. We definitely try to put ourselves in the shoes of a diverse group, but of course we did not get a chance to fully vet them. So we submit those to you to consider, to put on ice, to assign to a new task force or some other group to do the community engagement we think they deserve for a shared resource like curb space in the future when a equitable and diverse feedback on the shared resource can be done. So we ask you that we would like to terminate our task force. If it's willing for you, we are available, either a consultant for a new task force or new committee or staff in the future to do that. But we don't feel that we can fill our charge at this point until the public health emergency is over. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you to you both. Ms. Davison, this is Mayor Stewart. It's good to see you and Mr. Gorman. And first, I just want to start off by saying thank you so much to you and to all the task force members. Yes, when you signed up for this, you did not think it was going to be as long of a process. And it is clear through your presentation this evening, as well as the report you've provided to us, that you all did a great deal of work and got, so close to doing the public engagement piece. And so we just want to thank you for all the background research you did, the interviews you and presentations that you had, and the recommendations that we have before us now. I just want to, since we have both of you here, want to see if my colleagues have any questions for you, but I can't imagine any of us would want you to continue work that you feel like you can't continue doing. And we very much appreciate your recommendations of, for us as a council working with the city staff, how we move forward with these recommendations. So I'll turn it over to my colleagues now to see if anyone has any questions or comments. And I see Councilman Kostick raises her hand.
Thank you very much for this report and for all of your work. As the mayor said, I know you didn't intend for this task force to go as long as it did, and I really appreciate your long-term work on it. And it's such a complicated issue and is very personal to many people. People feel very strongly about parking. So really, really appreciate all of your work on this. Thank you. I also love that you have some recommendations that are very specific and some that are kind of looking bigger picture, which I think is really helpful to us kind of longer term as well. I just had two questions about kind of how you came to your recommendations on two of the elements. So the first was, if I'm understanding correctly, the recommendation that the city have the citywide parking permits. And I'm wondering if you looked into other places that have something like this and what you found with regard to having the permit for this versus in many cases, I know there are cities around the country that are, sorry, I'm distracted by my 5-year-old who just came in, the joys of working from home. I know there are many cities and around our area that have just a parking permit where it is residents can park for longer than 2 hours, but 2-hour parking or 1-hour parking is free for others. So I'm just curious if you thought about the pros and cons of having it be open like that versus there being the permit structure for that.
Jackie, should I take this?
You take it, Greg.
Great. So we had a debate on, what is curb space and who has a right to it, who owns it. So, on one extreme is that a property owner has a legal right to the street and curb space and sidewalk in front of their home. That's one extreme. The other extreme is the sidewalk and the right of way and the road and the parking space are a shared resource where everyone has a 1 in 17,000, whatever the recent census is, share of the curb space. And not only in front of my house, my home, but in front of any of your home in there, that we all have the right to it. Now, certain shared curb space it is maybe more valuable in terms of convenience to get to shopping areas, pharmacy, and those type of things. And maybe more valuable for people of limited mobility. So we tried to balance the convenience or inconvenience of a homeowner who just wants to be able to park near their home with the right of someone who owns a 1 in 17,000 share of a shared curb space, so they can go and pick up their medicine or and don't have to walk or those type of things. So we thought that the current RPP system does not fully recognize the communal nature of the shared curb space, that it's overcompensated towards a homeowner and frankly, single dwelling homeowners at that. So we thought this was a compromise. Compromise is that everyone should be able to park in zone 1, 2, 7, 6, whatever, for a period of time. Would it be reasonable if you put yourself in the shoes of a differently abled person who needed to park in a hot spot for a period of time to pick up a prescription? Think about that. What would that be? 1 hour, 2 hours? Okay, but for those anywhere in the city. But then for folks who live in a kind of a hotspot, to recognize the convenience factor that they still get the zone 1, zone 7, those type of things. So we try to balance those two things: equity and convenience of things. So thank you, council member. That was our thinking, and we thought long and hard about it. And there were some definitely passionate feelings about it, but we did come to consensus and thought that this balanced those two things. And right now, our recommendation that's implicit in that our analysis is that the city currently overly favors single dwelling homeowners and hotspots over the needs of the whole community.
Thank you. That's really helpful. My other question, I guess, is a little more broad in terms of next steps, but also just thinking about, I think you've raised good points in the report as well about kind of the pros and cons of higher price parking. It could discourage driving, which I think is really important for people who don't need to drive, but it also can be an equity issue for people who are not able to drive and park if there is a higher cost. So I just think that's something we need to think about and balance. So I'm curious about kind of what your recommendations are on next steps, given that you haven't been able to do the outreach. And then I will turn off myself because my child is pounding on a ball next to me.
So our report is we don't think there's any next steps for this task force to do. We have recommendations for what either the city staff, another task force, another committee, or a community group does. But we do recommend that it's done in an equitable and samples the full diversity, geographic, age, car ownership, you name it, multifamily dwelling versus single family dwelling, diversity that's in our city. We don't think we can do it, we don't think anyone can do it right now, frankly, whether it's digital, in-person pop-ups right now at this point. Jackie?
I thought the question was on higher price parking, right? Was that, I mean, I apologize. I don't have my hearing aids on and
Jackie, I think that was just a comment. She made a comment that they need to think about, you know, the higher prices. I don't think it was a question, council member, but a question what do you think our next steps was. I interpret
next
that
steps, I
correctly?
apologize. Yeah. You know, I guess I personally regret not being able to implement the community participation, because I think that's so critical to get that input. I mean, what you have are the recommendations from the task force, basically, and while we, you know, have broad input to us, we don't have the you know, the input from the community and from the stakeholders, you know, so I don't know. I think therefore the recommendations are insufficient for the council to act on, and I think the community input is critical. And I think the council, I mean, my hope is that you will pursue maybe with, you know, another task force, and maybe some of us would be available to, you know, to continue. That's what I say. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. It's helpful to get the perspective of what you think, even if you all are not doing it as a task force, what you think needs to happen next. So thank you very much. And again, thank you for your work.
Thank you. Councilman Dabala.
Yes, thank you. Some of these were the same kinds of questions that I was going to ask. What the next steps would be for the city council to take. I have to confess, I'm having a little trouble finding the detailed community outreach report.
Oh.
So maybe Ross can share that with me and anybody else who may be having trouble finding it. But I remember seeing it a while back, and I remember the survey and the details. And so I am wondering whether it's possible to look at acting on some of the short-term recommendations and at the same time moving ahead with some version of the survey, knowing that that's only half a loaf in terms of community outreach. But maybe we can anticipate being able to do some outdoor pop-ups in the spring to complement a survey that's been translated, and, you know, take the winter to gear up to get some feedback on some of these broader recommendations for bikes and curb share and all of the other things besides just how much do you charge for a parking meter, which are the pieces that I'm most interested in. So I wanted to get your reaction to that. And I forgot to say, and thank you for hanging in, because it's just been a year, hasn't it? So thank you so much for persevering through this and for all the work you all have clearly done. So I was wondering if I could get your reaction to pursuing part of the community outreach and maybe some of the short-term recommendations, or if you think we should just leave well enough alone till the pandemic's over. Meaning the city council take it on, not you.
Jackie, you want to take that?
Well, you know, again, I'm thinking of the diversity aspect, and then what part of the community participation that you could take on that would achieve that diversity. Certainly we would have to wait until spring. I mean, you'd have to wait until spring to I think to launch any part of the of our outreach plan, and perhaps the pop-ups would be possible in good weather. But it would have to be designed so that we could reach those cultural and the racial communities. So that's what I see. Maybe there are other ways, but
I agree with Jackie, council member. If you do part of it now, you will get a non-representative sample that will bias all of you and city staff on how to manage the shared curb space. And that was our decision, is that if you can't do it right, don't do it. If you do it wrong, you are going to, you are, I don't want to say injure is the right thing. You're not going to address everyone. It's going to be unequal, even if you don't think it is. We don't know who doesn't come out of their house, out of their apartment, out of their dwelling. You don't know who's walking, who feels comfortable going to the stores, who feels comfortable walking where we've planned pop-ups along Sligo Creek and Becca-Lily and up near Langley Park. We don't know that. Maybe you do know that, but we suspect that many people are afraid to engage. And then we know there's a digital divide. So unless you have good data showing that that's not the case, I'd wait to that. Another thing too is I would not hold, maybe spring, but again, it's guided by public health, and I would wait. So I wouldn't, we tried that multiple times, moving the goalposts down the line, and almost each time, as you know, surges came back and things took a turn for the worse. So we hope spring, but again, I'd have it guided by public health.
Yes, thank you very much for that.
Great. And I see the city clerk has her hand up. Did you want to?
I did. I'm sorry for my video not being on, but I wanted to point out that the task force report is a link on the agenda cover memo. And that may be why your Councilmember Dabala or anyone else is having difficulty finding it. So that report and the community engagement outline is a link on the cover memo for the task force agenda item.
Okay, so I apologize. I didn't realize that the engagement memo was part of the report, which was linked to the, okay.
Sorry for the confusion.
Councilman Dabala, I just emailed you the link. So
Thank you. Yeah, I have the report open. For some reason, I'm not seeing.
Scroll down at like.
Yeah, oh, a
first
lot of
3
white space,
pages.
and then, sorry, I don't mean to take up time with my ineptness with, oh yeah. All right, well, thank you for all of the work that you've done, and thank you for that candid response to my question. I mean, I'm always wanting to get moving, but sometimes that's not the best thing to do. So thank you.
Councilman Searcy.
Hello. So I want to send my appreciation to you all. You were dealing with a very difficult task during a very difficult time. And so definitely appreciate all of the hard work that the task force put in on its recommendations. One thing that came to mind for me, and I think this might have come up during the inception, is, to what extent should the city consider doing a parking study for other parts of the city? It seemed to me, and you all correct me if I'm wrong, that there are aspects of supply and demand for parking, which the original study really did focus on wards, like the Old Town area, wards 1, 2, and 3, where you kind of know how many parking spots, where are they, what's the peak time. But I would say perhaps for other parts of the city, that demand is different for different reasons. And so one of the things that I wondered about was, what was the task force thought around the need for, a more comprehensive look at parking demand. I think, the community outreach is important and making sure that we're getting feedback from the residents directly. But, there's a lot of transient, people coming in and out they don't live here, right? So there's a need for us to fully understand, in addition to, we're constantly hearing about traffic studies, but I kind of see parking studies as a part of that overall understanding of how people are coming in and out of the community. Did the task force talk at all about that?
I'll take this, Jackie. So
Yeah.
we
Oh,
didn't
okay.
we didn't talk about more studies. We felt the Sabra, if it was a little dated, did address some things, but to your point, think about the purple line. It will change parking demand in different places. It'll also affect density and probably business development too. And so there are existing studies, both by the Purple Line group about expected use of stations in the borders of Tacoma Park and how that might impact parking. And then we had a natural experiment of a Long Branch Business Festival. I think that was Jackie, where the business owners took surveys of who walked, who drove, and that was very informative. And that actually kind of matched up with what the Purple Line projections were too. So why we didn't say, let's just do another study, we leveraged existing studies, those two examples of what we thought would happen. We also talked about like what the change in enrollment might be with Montgomery College Tacoma Park campus as well. So we did not recommend a new study. You can recommend that and put resources towards it. We looked for existing data and we found some.
And one thing I will say, and Ms. Grisby is aware of this, on the Prince George's side in Ward 6 for the Purple Line, they did receive grant funds to do a more in-depth parking analysis on their side of the Tacoma Langley station. We haven't had something similar on our side. So that's why I was just wondering whether or not that was something that might have come up as well. Okay.
No, and I want to say that, this is the kind of information that we would expect to get from our community outreach, because we would talk to people, talk to residents, because there are hot spots. And that would require attention, and we would want to hear from those, the residents in those areas. So I know you mentioned Montgomery College. We know that's a hot spot.
And I do think that the community outreach will be very helpful for understanding residents' just natural behavior. So for example, in Ward 6, we're very car-based, but we also have a large number of our residents that earn a living through their cars, right? So there are people who drive Ubers, cab drivers. There are people who have different home repair, landscape businesses that they need vans and they carry equipment and therefore they need space. So that community engagement, I think you're absolutely right. And that you all are absolutely right, is critical to kind of understanding that dynamic, which is something you wouldn't necessarily pick up on through like some sort of analysis of the number of spots that are available.
Although one of our task force members represented folks who had home-based businesses. So if you'll notice, all sprinkled through our recommendations, we have mentioned that on multiple places to realize that is a special consideration, either in the issuance of parking permits or the use of curb space.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, that's helpful. Again, thank you all for all of your hard work on this. It's a great report.
Councilmember Kovar.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks to Greg Gorman and Jackie Davison. I appreciate the work that you put in and that the task force put in tonight. We got good Carroll Avenue representation, so thank you for that. Just had a few questions, and I understand in the context of what you're suggesting, which is that we are not going to you're not recommending that we actually move ahead on these pending the ability to do more engagement. I don't want to get too deeply into it, but just a few areas that I did have questions about. So one of them I think is touched on in the report, but I was curious what you thought about it. If you could expand on it a little bit in areas, especially maybe near commercial areas or near transit, whether it's the metro station or later the Purple Line and so on. This idea of having a time-based parking situation so that perhaps, and I'm just putting it out there like this, that during weekday, daytime hours, there could be more flexibility in terms of allowing people from elsewhere to park in an area, but at night or on the weekends, there might be less when people are home and so on. How deeply did you get into that question?
Go on, Greg.
Very deep. it's some people resign over it, but I would say it's a passionate topic. Again, in our earlier comment, trying to balance the needs of all 17,000 residents versus homeowners, and we thought we struck a balance. I think we agreed on the best course of action was we don't know what the outcome would be, and I think that we recommended a pilot. A time-based pilot, and not just to you know how to make it, but do a real-world test and see for time limit period of time, and see what happens. So we're not sure. It could go either way, but we do think that the current paradigm doesn't fully share a communal resource. We don't know the right answer, but we thought it's time to explore other options. And that was one option we thought about, but there may be others. But the point is that we think we should move away and try to think of the needs of all 17,000 residents rather than a few dozen in various hotspots, and balance those, frankly.
Right. So I guess the question I would ask is, within that formulation, people don't necessarily want to park in every area, right? There are some reasons or some attractions, if you want to call it that make some areas more desirable for parking than others. So how does that filter into what you just described?
Yeah, so great question, great points. And we litigate there's a lot of them. So one of the things is wherever you draw boundaries, a hotspot becomes for those type of people who want to use a shared communal resource, become the edges of those resources, right? So sometimes you block out a certain hotspot, the new hotspot becomes around it, right? And then there's the enforcement issue. So a lot of these solutions that we debated are frankly unenforceable or difficult to enforce. And then we got that from our police department and parking enforcement staff and city staff. So I don't think we have the right answers. We don't have the answers. We have suggestions, they're recommendations. But what we do recommend to you is that we don't think the current parking paradigm when it comes to hotspots, which are close to, again, business resources, pharmacies, places to shop, places to get home repair things, that every resident of Tacoma Park would want. And frankly, some of the businesses want people from outside Tacoma Park to visit. But really for our residents, we should balance that. Maybe move it a little bit in the direction of a shared communal resource. Can be a few steps, can be halfway in between, I don't know, but wherever it is now, move it in that direction. I'd lean on parking staff and look at our recommendations or riff off of that, but that was our overall recommendation, looking for equity and sharing a communal resource.
Okay, and then on parking meters, just a couple other questions. So I wasn't 100% sure what you were suggesting. I know it's been discussed in the past that if you get rid of parking meters and go with the kiosks and so on, it enables more spaces. Have you had a formal decision on or recommendation on that point?
So again, we were divided in talking to other jurisdictions in Montgomery County and in other parts of the country, reports from those, that why they may be easier to manage, might, especially with smaller vehicles, things like that, might change the spaces a little bit. There's a digital divide issue that comes up, and so you need to have one that uses both change and smartphone technology. So I think we're divided on that. I think so we
Okay.
should explore that, but in 5 years, that may not be the technology anymore. So
Okay, well, I'll just close with a couple of things, and I think it's important, at least in where we border other jurisdictions, whether it's Old Town with DC or areas over on New Hampshire Avenue, where it's with Prince George's, to work with them and maybe even pursue common parking concepts if we can. That's one thing I would say in the outreach program plan, and I haven't gone through it either, as my colleague, Councilmember Duval hadn't had a chance to it yet either. We did fund these navigators too in our last budget. We haven't sort of figured out how to use them yet, but I encourage that to be included within that. Then the last thing, and I do agree with you on charging and restricting dumpsters and storage units being parked, because I've heard a lot about that from people. And the last thing is, and I just toss it out into the universe, there are 4 spaces in Old Town that have no meters and no anything, and anyone can park there for free as long as they want. Could we just kind of
No.
agree to put some meters there, and even if we don't do all the rest? So,
that's an idea, but why not take the advantage and turn them into either handicap parking, more handicap parking spaces, or a bike corral, or a pickup for business. I mean, there's lots of other uses you can
right, but
do.
we should decide on something, and so as
Yeah.
opposed to just leaving them there, I think is what I would say. So thank you very much.
Councilmember Smith?
First, I'd like to thank the two of you for working on this under these extreme conditions. The one area that I would like for you to elaborate on is recommendation number 9, using a subsidy for residents that use Lyft or Uber or alternative transportation like scooters. This is something I think is extremely important, during the pandemic. As you know, the bus service has been free in the city. I don't think that is going to last for eternity. I mean, there's talk from the county council that they might try to reduce the fare, but there's still a lot of people in our community, especially in Ward 5, that transportation costs are a burden. So figuring out how we could subsidize that would be very, very interesting and something I would support. So can you guys elaborate on that a little bit?
I think I got this idea from a bartender or a server at some restaurant. So, and then her colleague too chimed in. So, a lot of folks who work come in from other parts of the city, and they have trouble parking. They park at Adventist Hospital, they park in DC, they do some illegal parking to get there. So we were thinking some of us are government employees who are subsidized with Metro benefits. And so I think that's where the concept came, is it may not cover all of their costs, but especially paired with a regressive RPP program that DC has implemented and many other jurisdictions around the country have. If you have multiple cars, each car progressively costs more and more. And we didn't do the actual numbers and how it would cost to administrate it, but we thought it might generate more money, or maybe over the long term, actually not generate money as people pare down the number of vehicles if it becomes prohibitively expensive. But if there's any money to either give a partial credit to some residents who need either do means testing or age and different abilities, whatever you think, but definitely there's a subsegment where transportation is a disproportionate amount of their monthly budget. But we thought maybe there was some money from that and from meters and those type of things that might exceed the cost of administering the program. It probably would not cover full transportation costs, and it probably wouldn't cover a lot of people, but it probably covers some.
But the other thing, I think there's a downtown, or I don't know what those buses, the free buses.
The circulator.
Oh, they are the circulator. I don't know why they don't have one coming through this area, because it's so heavily traveled. Look at Sunday, on Sunday, there's the market. I used to drive in to the market and park, you know. So a lot of Washingtonians come in, and I think that would be so useful for this area, especially on weekends.
I agree. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Any other questions or clarifications? Terrific. Well, I just want to say thank you to both of you and to the full committee. And Mr. Gorman, one of the things that I'm really taking away from your presentation tonight is when you said the current paradigm does not equitably share a communal resource. I think that really, I appreciate. I wrote that down as something that I don't want to forget as we come back to these recommendations and the work of this task force. I thought that encapsulated a lot of what you were talking about regarding the recommendations that you're providing to us. So I think we will take these back, work with the city staff and our colleagues here on the council. And I think you both know, we're also redoing all of our committees and rethinking how we approach committees and task force and other things. And so we appreciate your work on this. And as we're doing that work on committees and task force, and also coming back to this, we will hopefully move this forward in the near future, particularly when we can do greater community engagement.
Great. And we look forward to your decision on whether you relieve us of our duties. That was our recommendation.
I think we can do that. Yes. Does anyone have any objections to that? I think we can. Yes. Thank you very much. You are officially relieved of your duties on the task force. And we thank you so much for sticking it out as long as you did and providing us with such a great roadmap with which to move forward with. So thank you all. And and hopefully we will work on another task force together.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Great. All right, we will move now to public comments. And I think we just had 2 people signed up this evening for general public comments. I believe the first is Barbara Whitney. I think you are all set to go. Ms. Whitney, I think your mute button may still be on.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Hi, Barbara Whitney from Ward 1, representing the Climate Action Coffee Group. And I'm here to talk about the climate emergency, specifically our concern about how we can help to protect our region's biodiversity and how the city of Tacoma Park can make a difference. And of course, climate change management is about energy efficiency, limiting fossil fuels, et cetera, but biodiversity is really rarely mentioned. And we feel that it should be at the center of our efforts because biodiversity is what really feeds human beings day by day. And we cannot eat carbon emissions for dinner. Myriads of insects, including pollinators, depend on native plants for their survival. And our survival depends on their survival because they are the basis of our food chain. And these insects do not get what they need from introduced plants, nor from lawns, nor empty agricultural space, nor the paved areas of our cities and suburbs. And because of this, biologists, entomologists, and ecologists tell us that the world is on a path to biodiversity collapse, and that means no food. Luckily, studies by such scientists as Doug Tallamy show that if we can individually create small areas of biodiversity, if we plant many more natives, especially the keystone ones, which support the most wildlife, if we remove invasives, if we create as many wildlife habitats as possible, and if we weave together small areas of gardens, parks, public spaces, schools, etc., we can eventually connect them and create native plant and wildlife corridors. And we will have made a big contribution from some small things. And so our CAC pollinator group is working to join with other cities like Rockville and Mount Rainier and the Maryland chapter of the Sierra Club to create the Maryland Wildlife Corridor connecting the Chesapeake Bay to the Appalachian Mountains. And that would make an even bigger contribution. And CAC asks the city council, the new green team, and other city employees to include this important issue in their work. And we hope that together with us and other residents, we can also empower Tacoma Park residents. Those who live in houses, it's easier for them. For those in apartments, we could do things through balcony greening and beautification projects, guided group invasive plant removal, native planting, and community gardening on apartment grounds. And Tacoma Park residents of all stripes can give the native plant and wildlife corridor the boost it needs. This whole thing can seem overwhelming. And as cultural anthropologist Margaret Mead said famously, we won't have a society if we destroy the environment. But she also said, never doubt that a group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Whitney, for joining us this evening. And please thank the entire coffee. Like, I think it's very enjoyable that you give us these updates each week. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next we have, I think I saw Miss Mary Jane Machui. Is she? Yep, there she is. Mary Jane, you're next.
Here we go. Sorry. Can you hear me now? Hi. Thank you for letting me talk. I just want to say a little tail into what Jackie and the man from housing were talking about. Please, please give special spaces to people who have hybrid cars. I have a 10-year-old hybrid car that was bought in California and goes by special standards, very low emission standards. I would like to able to park in spaces and a little priority for people like us who have hybrids. And we can't afford electric vehicles. If maybe the city could help us afford to buy them. I mean, the cheapest one I saw was $30,000, which no way I can afford. And then I just want to talk, of course, housing and community development department. One of the goals, I looked it up today, was to ensure safe, decent, and affordable home ownership, underlined home ownership, and rental housing opportunities. It's like where is there safe, decent, and affordable home ownership? I mean, come on. I mean, most of the people who work in Tacoma Park can't even afford to live here, which is a travesty. So especially people like me who are disabled. My son, he can't, and you fill out a form for property tax credit, and you almost have to be a lawyer to figure out how to fill it out. And I've been trying to help two of my neighbors, and I'm only average intelligent. I wish I was an accountant. Maybe I could help them better, but I feel really angry because I can't help them better. And they may be leaving, and the diversity of our neighborhood is going to go when they leave. And it's just really, I'm sorry. And also in a positive sense, I'd like to give a shout out to Mr. Walker Latimer, who works for the custodial department in the community center. He's a damn good person. I mean, he's always a smile. He always, even if I come in feeling grumpy, he smiles at me and acknowledges my presence, says hello, which really makes me feel good. And also third, this is general. I would like to ask for reparations for Black Americans in this city who are making less than $50,000 a year and who were born here. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Machui. I believe those are all the public comments for this evening. We'll turn now to council comments. Any council comments for this evening? Councilmember Siemens.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. And I just want to let people know that I did attend the memorial service for the city's official peace delegate, Pat Lovelace, who passed away right after the beginning of the pandemic. It was not from COVID, but it was from his long-standing health issues created when he was attacked by the Ku Klux Klan during a protest that he was part of. Anyways, it was very interesting to hear a recap of his life from many of his friends and fellow protesters that had participated with him, and to see how dedicated he was to his job as the city's official peace delegate. He had entered the work when he first was released from a hospital when he was about 22 years old. And from that time on, he dedicated his life to the various protests and marches that focused around peace. It wasn't just anti-war protests, but it was anything to do with peace, whether it was violence against women, violence against children, any of the unpeaceful things. He was at the forefront of those protests. He was the first official peace delegate that we know of. Tacoma Park was the first city to have an official peace delegate in the country. And I think that I can be confident in saying that if Pat were here tonight, he would be challenging the council to decide how his work's going to be continued. And he would ask us to recognize the benefit of having someone that's dedicated to advocating for peace in all aspects of interactions between people. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Councilmember Smith.
First, I want to let people know that city staff is hosting an event on Saturday from 10 to 11 to discuss public space, specifically for Ward 5 and the city in general. There will be interactive workshops and about roadways, streeteries, sidewalks. So it should be a really good event. And it's going to be held at the park at the bottom of Houston and Kennebec, right across the street from Schleicher Creek Parkway. So that is from 10 to 11. There will be another opportunity for residents to discuss public space, October 23rd, same time, 10 to 11. This opportunity will be at Essex House. That's at 777 Maple Avenue, the 4 7s on Maple Avenue. I want to remind my colleagues and staff that the Montgomery County chapter of MML is having their meeting tomorrow at 6:30. The interim superintendent of Montgomery County Public Schools will be a guest speaker, and we're also having Marjorie Williams, Montgomery County Broadband and Franchise Division Manager. So those are the two guest speakers starting at 6:30. And I just want to thank Ms. Machui for mentioning reparations. I am actually lobbying on Congress and the White House on the HR 40 bill, the reparations bill, and we are very close to getting a vote in the House. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Costick.
Thank you. And just a couple of things. I had an opportunity also to attend the memorial for our peace delegate, Pat Lovelace, and it was really wonderful to hear more about his life and to get to know more about the things that he had done that I didn't know, and kind of flesh out the bigger picture. So it was really a great memorial. I'm very grateful to everyone for organizing it and taking part in it. I also attended a meeting last week for the residents of Jefferson Avenue to look into the potential of requesting traffic calming and possibly several speed humps there. So that's something they're working with Public Works on, and I appreciate the help from Ms. Braithwaite on that. That might be something we'll be considering in the future. So just want to flag that for my colleagues. And then finally, tomorrow, the National League of Cities Human Development Federal Advocacy Committee, which I'm a vice chair for, is meeting for our final meeting of going through our edits of the National Municipal Policy, which all the committees are doing. And our committee did a lot of edits too this year. Each of the committees kind of has a piece where we look at our the recommended policy for the National League of Cities on different issues. And our committee took a really deep dive into issues this year, particularly related to families and children and the impact of COVID on childcare and schools, as well as immigration and workforce development. And we also, although it is not within our purview, made some recommendations to the public safety Federal Advocacy Task Force that National League of Cities has, specifically to remove some of the references in their policy to recommending school resource officers. So we made recommendations to remove that and to focus on more restorative justice methods, more holistic methods in school to support students more. So we'll be finalizing our recommendations tomorrow, and then those go to the NLC board at the meeting in November. But we've done some really good work on that, I think, and I appreciate also one of the Ward 3 residents who was on the Public Safety Task Force in Tacoma Park also helped with the review of the recommendations to the Public Safety Committee for NLC. So really appreciate his help on that as well. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Councilmember Kovar.
Thank you. Just wanted to mention a few things. First, I appreciate that the staff did post this week the request for proposals for the food security grant program that we had voted to approve previously. And so that's now out there, and I encourage organizations that are involved in that kind of work to apply. And I do want to say that I continue to believe, and I know some of my colleagues have commented on this as well, that we need to continue pushing to identify other ways that we can utilize ARPA funding to assist those who are struggling because of the economic impacts of the pandemic, and try to get some additional funding approved and made available, ideally this year, as opposed to waiting until next year. And I'll continue to think about best options for that. Just two other things I wanted to mention. One, reference was made to the event for Mr. Lovelace over the weekend. I wasn't there because we were also doing around the same time the Indigenous Peoples celebration, and actually Councilmember Dabala did make it to that event as well. And I think we had about 30 people there by Sligo Creek. I want to thank Gabrielle Tyak for leading the event, and also Donna Wright from the city for organizing it. And I think it's the type of thing that could easily become a annual type of event. I think we had a few more people this year than last year, and hopefully that could continue. And just with regard to Pat Lovelace's memorial, since I couldn't be there because of the other event, but I appreciate both of my colleagues mentioning that, and I'll just say love it, love it, love it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Searcy.
Great, thank you so much. A couple of quick items. One, I want to thank our police department. They're doing so many great events in Ward 6. Last night was Coffee with a Cop at the IHOP, and it was an evening edition. And we also have the Trunk and Treat that is coming up on Friday, October the 29th from 4 until 6 on Ann Street. And so we are excited to have our police department engaging with the community in a positive way in Ward 6. Just want to again remind people that the farmers market is still happening, is still going strong. Had a chance to go and pick up churros as well as fresh fruits and vegetables. I actually eat healthy sometimes, but but I do want to encourage people to come out to the farmers market. I am amazed at how even in masks, all of the vendors remember who you are, and they're so eager to help you. And I learned that I could freeze the coffee that I purchased to help keep it longer. I didn't know that. I didn't know you could freeze coffee beans. Learn something new every day. So I want to encourage you all to go out and engage with those vendors and participate in the market. Also, we will have a public space workshop on Saturday, the 16th from 1 until 2 at the Rec Center. So I want to encourage Ward 6 members to go out and talk about public space. I'm really excited to participate myself, so I plan to be there. And I think those are all of the announcements I have. I do want to say I was unable to attend some of the events this weekend. I have just allergies, but you know, in the day of COVID and you're coughing, you stay home. But I truly miss and value the contribution that Pat Loveless had on our community, and his spirit lives on. And I truly hope that one of our residents is willing to pick up that torch and advocate for peace. So thank you all so much for those that were able to attend. And again, my thoughts and prayers continue to go out to those that knew Pat and his family. Thanks so much.
Great. Councilmember Siemens has his hand up again. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Searcy reminded me of the Coffee with a Cop that was last night, and Joyce and I went over and spent some time there. The the Public Safety Task Force and the councilors has frequently encouraged the police to interact with community members more, and they've been doing, I think, as Councilwoman Searcy said, some good work with these Coffee with a Cop and many other programs that they've started to implement to reach out to the community and give a chance for the officers and the community members to get to know each other a little bit. But I think we're not reaching the goal because, for example, last night there were very few community members who showed up, and I think we have to maybe help think that through on how we could make these events more attractive to community members so that we could accomplish the goals that we set out of building this relationship between the community members and the police so that we can form more trust in all directions and make sure that it really is a community. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. And thank you, Councilmember Siemens, for talking to us about Mr. Loveless. I'm sorry I was out of town with family and missed the memorial service, but thank you to everyone who was able to put that together this past week. Unfortunately, we have some sad news of passing of another resident in our community. Debbie Thomas lived her entire life on Prince George's. She was the auxiliary, excuse me, I'm not gonna say that word. She was at the VFW here in Tacoma Park, and she did remarkable work in our community, not only on behalf of veterans, but on behalf of members of across our community. She was in charge of the school supply drive, holiday gifts for children, the warm clothing drive. She will be greatly missed by her sister Kiki and her sons Jason and Brian. And, she was just such a fixture of our community, and a huge Nats fan on top of that. And so I know members of the family have been asked for their privacy at this time. And I'm sure the members of the VFW will be planning a memorial for her soon. But I just wanted to note that for many members of our community who I'm sure know Debbie, and she touched many people's lives. Next, I want to thank Cheer and Holy Cross for the vaccine clinic they held this afternoon at the Mapleview Apartments. I had the opportunity to stop by, and it was going very well. It was set up just in the lobby at perfect time between 3 and 5 as people were coming back from picking up their kids at school or returning home from work. And so it was a very successful vaccine clinic there. Today was also the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments board meeting, and it was a pretty packed meeting. Two things I just want to note for my council colleagues and for members of the public. I did send our board packet out to my colleagues, and for others who are interested, you can get on the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments website and look up the information. But two things I wanted to note is that after spending almost about a year working on optimizing high capacity transit stations and elevating equity emphasis areas, the board voted today to adopt regional priorities for optimizing land use around high capacity transit station areas and elevating equity emphasis areas throughout all of COG's planning. In addition, one of the first actions we took to actually operationalize that was the creating of a housing affordability planning grants program. This is a new grants program that COG will be doing. Basically, it is an initiative designed to assist local jurisdictions with grants of up to $75,000 with technical assistance for studies or analyses that have strong potential to create greater housing opportunities near transit and accessible to those with lower incomes. The program is modeled after the COG grant programs, such as the Transportation Land Use Connections Program. And so I've already sent the information to our Director of Housing and Community Development. But we did a great deal of work over the last few months on COG on this. And so just happy to see it pass and to already be putting it in place. And I think with that, I will now turn it over to our city manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council. This evening, I got a few updates. With this being October, I'll just raise again. There are many awareness events going on, but I'll raise again breast cancer awareness, and there's a lot of events going on in partnership with American Cancer Society and the county, and really focusing on a lot of health fairs. So please partake in that, or either the Domestic Violence Awareness Month as well, where Montgomery County Domestic Violence Coordinating Council has been hosting a lot of events, and there's many more events outside of the DVCC that's planned throughout the county. I also want to raise that the Delta variant continues to spread, and just want to continue to encourage individuals to protect yourself, protect others, protect your loved ones by getting vaccinated. And do not forget that you also get your flu shot now that it's October through the next several months. And so part of the variant and the spreading of the variant, there's a lot of conversations with the FDA advisory committee. They will be making a decision October 26th. They'll be meeting to discuss authorization for vaccinations for ages 5 to 11-year-olds. And I know there was a lot of conversation at the county, and we'll be watching the county rollout of that authorization once approved. They say they have a goal of 25 to 30% goal of vaccination that age group from 5 to 11, and they estimate about 105 kids in our county-wide is the population they're looking at. The other update that I have this evening is the Monster Bash is coming up Saturday, October 30th, from 1 to 5. We are still looking for those who would like to be a judge and help us judge costumes. If you want to help judge costumes, please email Vincent C at tacomaparknd.gov. We'll look forward to your partnership. The other update before I turn over to Director Cross, who's here with us again this evening, is ARPA. We're very, very close on selecting our ARPA manager. That should be happening very, very soon. And ARPA funding in general, staff continues to work through our workshops and putting together recommendations. At this point, as I've stated previously, the appropriations that council has appropriated thus far is sufficient, and we'll continue to bring back updates to council as we go through November 17th before you all go in recess. And I would say in conjunction with our workshops, we went through a senior leadership team workshop to also look at, we had the council priorities and all the other plans in the community that we have on the shelf. We've also went through a workshop to look at our prioritization from an operating perspective. And so we'll be sharing that with you, Mayor and members of council, fairly soon on what we deem as our organizational priorities and how we will be aligning that along with what was already stated that are your priorities. With that, I will turn it over to Director Cross this evening to get some updates from his department.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me on. I have a few updates for you all. However, thanks for making my job easier for a few council members who have made the announcements I was planning on making. So I'll make it quick. The food insecurity RFP was released on Monday, October 11th, and it is open until November 12th. So please, any interested parties, please take a look at that RFP and apply, as well as council members, I ask that you send it to your networks. The RFP has two focuses. One is on increasing signups in the SNAP program. SNAP was formerly known as food stamps by eligible Tacoma Park residents. And the other focus is to provide, secure, and distribute quality and nutritious, fresh and stable food for distribution to Tacoma Park residents in need. On the ARPA rental assistance, since the last time we met, we've had a few more households served, and for now we have approved $94,000 for emergency rental assistance. We continue to work with our Montgomery County partners of the Sheriff's Office, as well as our local nonprofit partners to continue to do our part in preventing evictions. This was already mentioned by both Councilmember Searcy and Councilmember Smith, but I just wanted to get another plug out for the public space community workshops. We're holding two on Saturday. First one's at 10 a.m., Sligo Stream Valley Park #1, which is by Sligo Creek Parkway and Kennebec Avenue. The second is at 1:30 p.m. at the Tacoma Park Recreation Center. And I do want folks to know and publicize that we will have simultaneous Spanish and Amharic translation. So language barrier will not be an impetus for folks to come out and let us know about their values that they hold when it comes to public space, parks, playgrounds, sidewalks, and streets. So we hope to see all of you out there as well. And I have personnel news. I'm happy to report that the new economic development manager has signed the offer letter and will be starting with the city in a few weeks. So that's very exciting as well to get them on board.
And with that, that concludes our city manager comments this evening.
Thank you so much. All right, we will continue with our meeting this evening and move on to our voting items. Tonight, we have two voting items. The first is a second reading ordinance approving traffic calming for the 7900 block of Tacoma Avenue. There's been no changes to this since the first reading. Would someone like to move the ordinance? Councilmember Kovar moved. Do I have a second? Councilwoman Dubala, a second. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, will the clerk call the vote?
Councilmember Kovar,
Aye.
Councilmember Dubala,
Yes.
Councilmember Costick,
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens,
Aye.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Searcy,
Aye.
and Mayor Stewart.
Yes. The next is the second reading ordinance for traffic calming on Auburn Avenue. Again, this one has no changes since the first reading. Would someone like to move this? Councilwoman Searcy, thank you. Do I have a second? Councilwoman Costick, second. Any comments or? Okay, not seeing any. Will the clerk call the vote?
Councilmember Kovar,
Aye.
Councilmember Dubala,
Yes.
Councilmember Costick,
Yes.
Councilmember Siemens,
Aye.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Searcy,
Aye.
Mayor Stewart.
Yes. Great, that does it for our voting items this evening. Next, we'll move on to our work sessions. Our first one is a discussion of council compensation. I believe we're going to be, yes, Ms. Smith is here, our HR director. And before I turn it over to her, I'd just like to say, remind folks that our council terms are generally 2 years, and that they go by actually pretty quickly. And we do review council compensation during, it's a regular thing that councils do review during their first year in office, because you don't want to do it right after you're elected, and you want to do it in enough time before the next election so that people who might be thinking about it, and we can put it in place in the next budget. So this is a regular thing that we do or that the council does in reviewing council compensation. And we did have a task force do that. Unfortunately, as with a number of things, like the task force we had earlier this evening, things ran into COVID, and we were able to look at their recommendations, but not really move forward on them. So that takes us to where we are this evening. And I will now let it go to Ms. Smith to walk through her presentation.
Thank you. Good evening. Thanks for having me. Are we able to share the presentation? I think City TV was going to help with that. Here we go. So as Mayor Stewart said, this topic comes up periodically. It was before the council last about 1.5 years ago, so it's been a little bit of time. So I'm going to walk through where we are and how we got here, and then go into some recommendations and have discussion with any questions that you have. So next slide, please. So the council salaries and health insurance benefits are laid out in the city code. The current salary levels were actually set in 2013 by the council at that time, and it is stated that it will be increased every July 1st by the amount of the employment cost index. So that is what has happened every July 1st since the salary level was set in 2013. It is stated that that adjustment can be suspended if the general staff wage adjustment for the overall city is suspended because of financial constraints. That has not happened in the recent past that I know of. And then the health insurance benefit specifically is stated that council members can participate in health insurance, but pay at a 50% share, which is what is consistent with regular city employees that are part-time or 20 hours a week. Next slide. So as I said, the provision to review the council compensation, and as Mayor Stewart said, is also in the code. Generally, there is a council compensation committee that is named in order to review the provisions and analyze and then give recommendations. That committee was set in 2019 and then gave recommendations to you in 2020, which I'll go over shortly. So next slide. So where we are right now, as of July 1st of this year, when the salaries were adjusted by the ECI again, the mayor is sitting just above 15,000, council members are just above 11,000. And then the benefits are, as stated, for the health insurance as per city code. Council members are eligible to participate at a 50-50 split between for premiums. So the city pays 50%, council members pay 50%. Participation in the Maryland State Retirement is mandatory since we are a participating member with that retirement system. The city does also have an optional 457 account, which is a deferred compensation account, which is also available to all city employees. And I believe there was a question before about whether council members could participate. I believe they can. I don't know that any are currently, but it is certainly an option to have council members participate. And there is a city match of contributions up to 2% of the salary is what it is currently set at. And then there's also an optional access to flexible spending accounts, also for current city employees. Right now, those are purely payroll deduction. So whatever amounts council members would choose to come out for either the medical expenses or childcare expenses would go into a flexible spending account. Next slide. So when the Council Compensation Committee met, they had a number of recommendations, kind of three different pools. The first was to update the principles of compensation, which were changed and has already been approved and adopted by council. So that piece is done. The salaries, the recommendation was to move. At that time when they recommended it was 14,000, it is now increased a little bit by this ECI. But to increase the mayoral salary up to 32,000 per year, and to increase council member salary up to 24,000 a year, and then to continue the adjustments using the ECI on each July 1st. And then the benefit recommendations that they had were to allow whatever the benefit package is available to all city employees, to have council members have access to that as well. And then they recommended to change the percentage of health insurance benefits from the 50% that is currently used to be an 80-20 split, where the city pays 80%, council members would pay 20%. They recommended a dependent care subsidy of $7,750. This is a little bit different than the flexible spending account, because this they recommended be just a subsidy as opposed to being a payroll deduction that comes out of the current salary. And then any new benefits that regular city employees hold, have council members be eligible for that. Then the other, the last two pieces of the recommendation that they had was an interesting idea to have a set dollar amount of benefits or salary and benefits, and to have council members be able to choose from whichever benefits they most needed up to that dollar amount. Next slide. So these are the figures of neighboring jurisdictions. They were just, these amounts on this slide were just verified within the past 2 weeks, so they are current. As you can see, Tacoma Park for council member wages, we're sitting 5th. For mayoral wage or mayoral salary, we're sitting 7th. I will note of somewhat importance, Rockville, Gaithersburg, Bowie, and Hyattsville all allow their council members to participate in the insurance plan, but it is 100% paid by the council member. There's no city payment into those insurance premiums, which can be sizable, as you probably know. So next slide is the options and recommendations. So I laid out 3 options. I will say first, as the committee recommended, that any new or current benefit programs that are available to all city employees, the recommendation was to allow that to city council as well. I believe that is currently in effect, and I would expect that any new benefits that are given would be allowed to council as well, unless there's some oddball tax implication or legal reason that that couldn't happen. But as far as I know, all of our current benefits are eligible and any new benefits likely would be. So I did not include those in these recommendations. So option one, the recommendation is to increase the salaries for the mayor up to 20,000, for council members up to 16,000, which is a little over 4,000 above where they sit now. And then to increase the insurance benefit to be consistent with what full-time non-exempt employees currently get, which is for council members themselves, individual coverage would be paid 100% by the city. Currently, all city employees, if they have individual coverage, the city picks up the premium. And then either spouse, children, or family coverage, there would be a split where the city would pay 80% and council members would pay 20%. So depending on the benefit level, whether you just choose employee only, whether the future council chooses employee only or family coverage, it would be a benefit between 9,000 and 22,000, depending on what that level is. Then option two is for the salary level, it is the amount, that the committee recommended. So that is changing the mayor's salary up to 32,000, changing council member salary up to 24,000, and then to increase the insurance benefit from 50% as it sits now up to 80%, but not to have the individual coverage paid by the city, to just have it be an 80-20 split for all coverage levels. And then option three is to keep everything the same. And I would say currently, unless a different change is made, it would still have annual changes on July 1st by the ECI. And then to keep the insurance coverage at the current 50% level are the three recommendations before you today. So I would be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Great, thank you for that recap. Councilmember Smith.
Thank you for giving us this presentation. The option of a dollar amount that the council gets to choose from a menu, I guess, of options, that is in addition to salary, or is that part of salary, healthcare benefits,
So it could be a combination of either. I believe that the committee had recommended that it just be the benefit package itself be at a certain dollar amount. So the salary level be set at the amounts they listed, I believe, were 32 and 24. And then to have an additional bucket of money that you can use for council members can use for benefits to pick outside of that, whatever that bucket was set at.
And so what happens if you're a council member that doesn't have children and you have the dependent benefit? How does that work?
So it could be up for discussion. Currently, there is no additional benefit for normal city employees, regular city employees. There is no additional benefit when something like that happens. So there's almost always going to be natural occurrences where someone is just having their employee coverage and then someone has family coverage. So they get just a natural inflation of benefit package because of their family situation. That kind of naturally occurs all the time. So currently there would be no offset for that. That's certainly something that could be discussed and written into the benefit package if that is something that council chose to do. But there's not generally an offset like that when those occur.
Okay, and finally, I'll just say that, as time goes on, this job is going to become more difficult. And if we really want to get more Black and brown folks to run for office and sit in these seats, compensation in a big general sense is something that needs to be considered.
Councilmember Smith, is there one of the options that was presented that you lean towards? Just trying to get a sense of council.
I would lean towards option 2, but increase the health insurance to 90% revenue.
Thank you. Councilman Devala.
Thank you. I generally agree with Councilmember Smith that we, if we want to attract Black and Brown and a diverse pool of candidates, we need to put some money on the table. I think that's right. I had a couple specific questions about the options. Maybe I didn't quite catch something. So the childcare benefit that the committee recommended, so that's included in the when you can select how much money you want to different categories of benefit, like if the health and the health card. So
Right.
I choose the health card, but I could have chosen childcare.
So that was part of the recommendation that they put forward, is that there could be an overall dollar amount set up for benefits where, and their suggestion was $7,750. And I think there was a specific calculation of how they got to that place. That be an additional benefit. And if needed, it could be part of that pot where the people that needed it could pick that selection. But if you did not need that, there could be another option that might be more beneficial to you that you could.
Right. And so right now, a city employee can do that?
No. So right now we don't have any additional benefits for that. What city employees currently have is a flexible spending account where they can choose an amount pre-tax to come out of their paycheck.
Right.
They don't get anything additional. They don't get any additional salary because of that. They can just choose to have money come out of their check pre-tax in order to pay for those. And there's very specific lists of things that they can use that money for. But
Right.
so the difference there is right now there's no additional salary or money given to them in order to do that.
Right.
That just comes out of whatever their salary or hourly pay is.
Right.
That's dropped over pre-tax in order to be able to use for those.
Right. And is childcare one of the options?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so council members now can do that, although there's clearly an upper limit because the salary is
Correct.
so low.
Correct.
So tell me again what you're proposing for that. Are you proposing additional funds or are you proposing?
So the only thing that I was recommending was strictly salary and health insurance.
Okay.
I did not make any recommendation on those. And part of that is because they're not specified in the code. The code only specifies salary and health insurance levels.
Okay.
Like the rest of the benefit package is not specified in the code. So it's a little more flexible with what is allowed.
Right. And right now that is allowed for council members as well as staff.
Within their current salary.
Within the
yes.
current salary.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
So, understanding that the council compensation committee recommended an even higher level of salary and benefits, I would be interested in options 1 or 2. And so my other question was about the health insurance. Tell us again, because I think I might have missed it, what the current level of city contribution is. Again, what do employees get from the city for their health insurance?
So full-time and part-time employees or council specifically?
Both.
Okay, so currently non-council members, if you are a full-time non-exempt employee, let me start over. All city employees have health insurance for themselves paid by the city.
100%.
Yes, for individual coverage. Then full-time non-exempt employees, if they add their spouse or their kids or multiple of that to turn it into a family coverage, The city pays 80% and the employee pays 20%.
Okay,
Those are prorated for part-time.
right.
So that's where the part-time 20-hour week employees pay, it's the same. They themselves get 100% coverage, but if they add spouse or kids, they're at 50%, which
Got
is
it.
similar to what council has right now, where council members can opt into health, dental, and vision, and the city pays 50% of whatever premium coverage they select, and council members pay 50% of the premium.
Okay, so currently council is treated for health insurance as if they were part-time employees,
Correct.
which we are. I'm a little bit concerned about parity with benefits with part-time employees. That's why I'm asking all these questions.
Yeah, the only difference between council members and part-time employees is that council members do not get individual coverage paid by the city. It's just across the board a 50-50 split, whereas permanent part-time employees, individual coverage is paid, and then anything else is at 50%. That's the one difference between council members and part-time employees.
Okay, and you're recommending one of your options is 100% of individual. And how does that play out for families? For council?
Then, yep. So one of the recommendations is to fall into the normal, like the full-time non-exempt employees, where 100% of individual coverage is paid by the city, and then spouse or kids or family coverage is the 80% paid by the city, 20% paid by council.
Okay.
Similar to the full-time. Yep.
Okay, Councilman Searcy.
So I may just be, it's after 9. I want to just make sure I have that, what you just said straight. So what you just said was that, and correct me if I'm wrong, for part-time employees, we currently pay, is it 100% for the individual?
Yes.
And then 50% for dependents?
Yes.
Okay. And so I guess one of the questions I have is, in terms of option 2, you're not proposing for that insurance benefit to be equivalent to the part-time or the full-time. Is it just 80% as an individual as well?
That's how I have it written. Yes. And I did that way because the salary levels are at a higher amount in that option. So I was trying to balance. In the first option, there was not quite as much salary increase as the committee had recommended, but a higher level of insurance. And in the second, it was a lower salary level than what the committee recommended. No, in the first, sorry, I got confused. In the first option, it was a lower salary level, so a higher benefit level. In the second option, it was a higher salary level, so a lower benefit level.
Yeah.
But still more than what council has now.
Yeah, it looked like there was some balancing that was trying to happen, and in my brain, I kind of like to separate the two issues.
Yep.
One conversation about what is the salary levels that are appropriate given the quality, the expectations, and the amount of work that people are doing based on the number of hours and that we have to work. That's one thing. And the other thing in my mind is, from a perspective of benefits coverage, what makes the most sense from an, just logistics and equity kind of point of view. And I am confused as to why, for all of the options, the benefits package wouldn't be equivalent to what a city employee, a part-time city employee would have, regardless of the option. So to me, it would seem to make sense that if you're part-time, this is what you get, whether you're on council or working for the city?
Yep. So I will say I did not do the math with either of the newly proposed salary levels, but depending on what the salary level is and depending on how much insurance keeps increasing, it's possible that if someone is on council and needs family coverage, that the cost of family, if it's at 50%, the cost of family coverage would be almost eat up the entire paycheck, which is why you may need a consideration for higher insurance level, even though you're somewhat comparable with part-time, even though I think it's arguable that you guys only work part-time hours sometimes. But since if we're considering you similar to part-time, it's still because of the equity of having and wanting to have people on council, and having high insurance levels, it may be better to have a higher paid insurance premium by the city at 80/20, so that the entire check doesn't get eaten up by insurance costs. If that makes sense. I'm not sure I explained that correctly. Because I think right now it's fairly close with, depending on what the insurance level is at 50%, I think it's fairly close with the paycheck and the insurance payment that's required. I think it's almost equivalent.
Okay, I think I get what you're saying. Like, depending on how much folks are paid and if they actually need that insurance, that premium amount is going to completely wipe out whatever compensation they may get in order to make sure
Correct.
they're able to be insured. Okay.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Because for instance, today, and as we know, insurance rates go up every year. But today, if for family coverage per paycheck, it's $569 per paycheck at 50% coverage, as opposed to if it's 80% coverage for family, it's $227. So it's quite a bit of difference. And if that is something that is really needed for residents to run for council, and if that's a benefit that is going to be helpful, having it at the full-time equivalent may be a good thing, and may have some more people run for council if that's the benefit level that's available.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that makes more sense, because in that way that family coverage is at the 80. The individual would still be at the 100, the family, and so then you're talking about the 20% versus the 50%, which would be part-time.
Correct, yes.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Great. Councilmember Siemens and then Kovar.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you for this presentation. I know a lot of work and thought has gone into this. It's not an easy subject. I think, first of all, let me just say that I do have, under the current plan, I do have the health coverage, and until recently, the insurance cost more money than what the pay was. So every month, when I finished working, I had to pay the city for the privilege of having the health insurance. It just recently got to where the health insurance was less than the pay. The thing that I think I've got to keep going back to is think, what's our goal? What is it we're really trying to accomplish? And then which of these is going to help us meet that goal in the best way? I think that, getting a broader portion of the community that is able to run for city council is the goal. That many of our residents right now say that they just couldn't do it because they can't afford to do it, and so the idea is that, well, if we make this more like a part-time job with equivalent pay and benefits for a part-time job, then maybe people would have the opportunity to participate in the city government and it would be more representative of the entire city. But I think that the argument I've heard against that is that you don't want people who are just wanting to be the city council member because they can make more money at that than they can at their current part-time job. That you want people who are, you know, committed to the community to be seeking these positions. With all that said, I don't have a pick right now. I see advantages to both option 1 and option 2. And I'm waiting to hear what my colleagues have to say. Wish I had more important things to tell you to guide you along your way, but I'm not ready to encourage you in one direction or another at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Kovar.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Ms. Smith, for the presentation. I think it's an important discussion. People will recall, and it's taken longer because of COVID, like so many other things, I think, as the mayor pointed out. But when the Council Compensation Committee was initially appointed by us now several years ago, we did ask them to look at this specific question of the extent to which the relatively low pay, even for a part-time position, honestly, is a barrier to participation by a broader segment of the population. I think the answer is pretty clearly that it is. I'd say I'm a little less worried than my colleague, Councilmember Siemens, that people might run just in order to get the money if it's a somewhat higher pay, because I think there's a lot that goes into running, and I'm not sure. It seems like it would become fairly obvious if somebody was doing that. I do, though, have some sympathy for what my other colleagues were talking about in terms of the part-time versus full-time angle, because if we're going to say that it's still considered a part-time job, even though there are times when it's more full-time in terms of the hours, I'm not sure why those who are in the council should get a different benefit package than other part-time people. And I know Councilmember Siemens mentioned that sometimes the cost of the health insurance can exceed the monthly take-home pay. I assume that's true for some people who have part-time jobs too. And so I just don't know whether that part of it should be dealt with. I do think, though, just for the mayor, I think one of the first two options, and probably the one with the higher pay, makes sense. I'm just not sure ultimately how I would see that question of should we be treated the same way or differently as part-time. I need to think a little bit more about that. And I just did have one specific question and one comment separately. So on July 1st, there was a percentage adjustment, right? Do you know, and you can tell us later if you don't, but what that percentage adjustment was, the ECI at that time, I guess it is?
If memory serves, it was 1.8. That may be incorrect, so I will verify that for you, but I believe it was 1.8.
But that sounds right, yeah. And so one other thing, I was just wondering if this could be, it's not even really a benefit, but just something else to think about. I know people on the council communicate in different ways through weekly reports and blogs and all these kinds of things. And depending on how it's done, there can be a cost for that and so on. And I just wonder whether, I mean, that could be a deterrent too. Could there just be some organized thing in the city that each council member could do, and they get posted all the time and everybody could look at all of it, just as one more suggestion, so that people who are running might not have to think, well, geez, how am I gonna, I can answer questions on my listserv, but how am I gonna really do this communication thing? And I have to worry about coming up with some account, and would it be a political or a campaign or whatever? And maybe we could just say, here's something that everybody can use, and they can each have their own on it. So I'm not expecting anyone to react to that tonight, but it's just another thought that I have. But I would lean toward one of the first two, ideally the number 2, which I think is the higher one. But again, just need to think a bit more about that part-time share question that we talked about. Thanks.
Councilman Costick.
Thank you. I have been listening intently throughout. It's been it's interesting to consider all the different options, and I appreciate all the information. I like some of my colleagues feel like I am torn between option 1 and option 2. As many others have expressed, I see problems with our current structure in terms of the pay and expecting people to have some other kind of income to be able to subsidize their work on the council to be able to do this job. And then you know, the hours required to do this job when you are doing another job or multiple other jobs is really, really difficult. And so I do think that increasing the pay would help with that and would help with our goals of racial equity and recruiting Black and Brown members of the community, making our council more representative of our community as a whole. And so I would like to see an increase for those reasons. And the discussion about insurance, I think, is a useful one as well. And I'm not totally clear on, you know, what the advantages or disadvantages of the different structures would be. And I also think that it's a little less easy to predict what the impact of that would be on the city budget, since some people will take it and some people won't. So that could be there could be some more flux in that as well. So that might be something for us to think about. I'd be curious if maybe you could get back with us in the future about sort of some of the larger budgetary impacts of the different choices, kind of in aggregate, if that makes sense. Like how much would option 1 cost in total if everyone took all of the benefits, or if an average number took that, and then the same for option B.
Sure, I can do that.
Cool. Thank you.
Great. And Ms. Smith, if I could ask you, and if you don't want to, if we can't answer this tonight, that's fine, but I'm just looking at our calendar moving forward, and we were going to have this as a first reading on November 3rd, and we don't have a meeting on the evening of October 27th. Do you think you'd have that information by next Wednesday, October 20th, that Councilman Costick just requested?
Yes.
All right. So what I'm hearing from council is that we're not going option 3 or C to keep the status quo, that people still need to think through a little bit more options 1 and 2, and which one they're leaning towards. And so what I'd like to say is maybe we put on next Wednesday, we have quite a number of work sessions already on the 20th, but maybe we could just spend a few minutes on this, checking in, and you could provide us with those budget numbers. And then if council had any other questions, we can raise that and then be prepared to vote on the 3rd, because I would really like to be able to have the first and second reading of this before we go on December recess. So does that sound good for everyone? If you have additional questions for Ms. Smith, please send them in and not Wednesday afternoon before that, if that would be nice. And then we'll do that. Yeah, Councilman Costick.
Can I just add another one right now? I was just curious if you can provide any sense of any information that's out there about basically the equity impacts of providing funds through salary versus insurance, if there's an advantage to doing one or the other.
I will see what I can find. Yeah.
I know that's a huge question, but a cursory look.
Sure.
It's a great question. Okay, great. Councilman Devala.
Particularly for folks in the lower end of the income scale, family income scale already. Because I think the answer to that depends in part on how much your household income is already. And since our stated goal is to make it fiscally possible for more people to participate, let's see how it plays out with that kind of a household. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? Good. Well, again, thank you for pulling this together. And we'll add to the agenda next week a quick work session to kind of answer any further questions and be prepared to vote on option 1 or 2 or tweaks to one of those on November 3rd. Okay. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have committee appointments, and a subcommittee of Councilman Costick, Dabala, and Siemens reviewed the applications that we had for board and committee appointments, and I'm turning it over to one of them. Yes?
Yes, and I think that it starts with me.
Okay.
So just briefly, here's where we are. We met twice this past week to review applications that were received for 9 city boards, commissions, and committees. And first, I want to say what a great group of eager candidates. And thank you to all who applied, because it was just awesome. We received nearly 100 applications. And how it breaks down for the committees that we'll get to that in a minute. We received nearly 100 applications. And so for most committees, commissions, and boards, there were more applications than there were slots. And so clearly not everyone is going to be able to be appointed to the slots that are available this time round. And so we want to encourage everyone who is not appointed to participate in civic life in other ways. And there's plenty of ways to do that. Some of the committees, such as recreation, already have subgroups that work on particular projects with people who are not officially on the committee. Several area nonprofits can use volunteers, especially delivering food. And we will be doing this again in 6 months, because for sure there'll be some changes. So what we did, we took the appointments in 2 pieces, in 2 groups. So tonight we'll talk about the boards and the commissions that have regulatory or quasi-judicial functions. And because there were so many applications, next week we'll brief you on we'll brief you and make some recommendations on the advisory committees. But we thought that best to get the commissions and boards going, because they have regulatory roles to play. So tonight, we're recommending for 4 groups: Board of Elections, CULTA, Ethics, and Tree Commission. And keep in mind that the Election Board, Ethics, and Tree Commission are limited to 7 slots, and that CULTA must have at least 7 members. You may recall that the city attorney advised that we not make any hasty changes to the numbers of members on those committees when we did that set of code changes. So for Board of Elections, 10 residents selected it as their first choice, 4 selected it as their second choice. Yeah, not an even ward breakdown, many more applicants from Ward 2. Commission on Landlord Tenant Affairs, 6 applicants selected it as their first choice, 3 as their second. And the ward breakdown's a little more even there. Ethics Commission, 6 applied for first choice, 5 for second choice. Ward breakdown a little short on wards 4 and 5. Otherwise pretty even. Tree Commission, 5 selected first choice, 2 selected second choice, and a little heavy on Ward 2. Not that ward breakdown is the most important thing. So with that, I will turn it over to Councilor Costick to tell you how we did look at the criteria and the selections.
Yeah, so as Councilmember Dabala said, this was not an easy process, and we got a lot of really great applicants, and want to thank all of the applicants who applied. for your interest and your dedication to helping the city. And as Councilmember Dabala said, whether we are able to appoint you to a committee or not, we want you to be involved. As we went through the process of looking at our committee applicants, as Councilmember Dabala pointed out, we had people who selected a committee as sort of their first choice, and then some people selected a second choice or did not select a second choice. And so as we were looking through, we were considering many of the different factors we talked about previously. We wanted to make sure that there was representation on the committees as much as possible of different perspectives and different backgrounds, different parts of the city. We wanted to look at people's experience, both directly with the topic as well as in the community. And we wanted to look at how, people had a variety of different experiences with the topic as well. So in some cases, someone might come at a topic as an attorney, and another person might come at the topic as somebody who does this in their free time and is very passionate about it. And so there are just a lot of different factors involved. And as we went through, we each on the subcommittee kind of looked at and considered people based on the factors that we had outlined. And I don't have all of them in front of me right now, so I apologize for not reading them all off. They were residency and other individual committee requirements, expression of interest, technical expertise and or lived experience, organization and community affiliation, diversity and inclusion, contributions to the group, and then our overall assessment. And so those were all kind of the factors we wanted to think about and we considered as we went through. And then, as I said, there were some members who applied to multiple, applied for a first choice and a second choice. And if we felt like someone kind of fit better within one or the other, we made that pick, as well as being constrained by the number of people within committees. There were cases where we felt like someone maybe didn't make the cut for a certain committee, but made the cut for a different one because we wanted to put them into the original committee, and maybe that wasn't possible. And so there were some cases like that as well. Councilmember Dabala, am I, or Councilmember Siemens, am I forgetting anything else I'm supposed to talk about here?
I just wanted to add that clearly this is the first time the council has approached committees this way. And so while we're just giddy with how well it has gone so far, there's clearly things we need to work on. The balance, the geographic balance, and particularly the racial and ethnic balance is not what we desired. It's better than it's been, but it's still not meeting at least my sense of where we need to be. But we will be doing this periodically. So I think that we can talk about that, how to improve the process at another point. But let's let Councilmember Siemens jump to the list of our slate of recommended candidates for the 4 regulatory and quasi-judicial groups.
All right, I thank you. And as you both said, it's been a challenge going through. There have been as close to 100 applicants as you could get. There were 99, I think, and a lot of criteria, a lot of goals, and making these, and having to juggle people around between their first and second choice, and sometimes even going beyond that. For the Board of Elections, we have listed Angel Tabe, Suez Antonucci, Ben Bellows, Matthew Ling, Margaret Morehouse, Trevor Perry-Giles, and Tim Anderegg. That would be the 7 candidates that we have listed for that for the Board of Election. For Colta, it'd be Sawa Kamari, Carolyn Bermudez, Mark Dussault, Chad Bogan, Karen Kruger, Juliana Chanu, Michael Mako, and we're still doing well with all these. They're still draft, so there's still work maybe to do on some of them. And the Ethics Commission, Michael Lizaja, David Hahn, Patrick Ann Murphy, Jess Braven, Michael Mule, Kelly Cochran, and Ellen Marcus. And then the Tree Commission is Gorky Villa, James Woodworth, Maple Martin, Bart Sheard, Paul O'Brien, and Xavier Sparrow. Now, we also listed, I know that Ms. Costick had said 4, but we also have the Noise Control Board, which is really just reappointments of the existing members, Ann Perot, Ashley Flory, and Clifford Schwartz. And then we did get into the one committee, the Nuclear Free Committee, which again was easy because it was reappointments of existing members, Paul Gunter, Jay Levy, and Julie Bodie. And we did not get to the other committees at this point in time, but we will bring those back to another council meeting.
Before we open it up to comments or discussion, I just realized that earlier on, none of us mentioned that we are still recruiting for this task force for sustainable finances for the city, with an emphasis on people who have finance, government, public policy, fossil-free and nuclear-free experience. So that we can have a short and intense experience, get quick in, get quick out. So those applications are due Friday, and I can't believe we all forgot to mention it earlier in the evening. But if you, for the rest of the council, I would sure appreciate it if we could all put out the word one more time and look for folks who have that skill set. Thank you. Mayor, did you want to take comments or questions?
Councilmember Kovar has his hand up. If you all are done with your presentation, we'll go to him first.
I didn't want to jump in before my colleagues were finished, but if they have finished, I will kick it off. One of the questions I had was, and Councilmember Costick was talking about the criteria that were used in evaluating the applicants and then making decisions on the proposed appointees. And I might have missed this if you said it, in which case I apologize, but to what extent was how long some of the members have already been on the panels to what extent was that one of the factors? In other words, was there a desire to try to even now start rotating people off, even though the term limits technically don't kick in yet?
I think that was something that we did consider as we went through it. And as you see with some of the reappointments, sometimes it was not practical to do that, but there were other times where, yes, it's good to get other people involved.
And then for the Nuclear Free Committee in particular, and maybe I misunderstood this, but so in that case, the Sustainable Banking and Investments Task Force, which was just referred to by Councilmember Duvall, will, among other things, be reviewing and making some recommendations about the potential future status of that committee. And so, as I understand it, it's possible that once the task force finishes its recommendations and then the council decides what to do, it's conceivable that within a relative handful of months, that committee may end up no longer being one of the ones we have anymore. It could end up being discontinued. It could end up being maintained in which case we probably want more members or maybe restructured in some other way. So I'm just not 100% sure what we expect the committee to do now during the pendency of the task force work being done.
This goes to the previous subgroup. And so I'll let council members Costick and Searcy supplement. But my recollection is that the group that is on the committee now made a pretty strong case for continuing, specifically because of a conference coming up in March, an international conference, and a couple of other specific things that they wanted to continue to work on while we were doing the other thing. So that's my recollection of, and then the 6 months kind of lines up pretty neatly with both that and the expected task force recommendations.
But at the moment, if some new person wanted to apply to that committee, could they do so? Or is it only being kept with the existing, the recommendation be that it just be kept with the existing folks for now?
I think all committees can be up to 7 people. And so that there would be technically openings on this. And I don't think the 3 of us at any time were trying to second guess which committees should be there and what sizes they should be. We were just trying to follow the
Recording stopped.
the rules as we understood them.
Recording in progress.
Thanks. And then just one last thing, and maybe we can get this later. It doesn't have to be right now.
I'm sorry, can I say something on behalf of the previous previous subgroup? Maybe
we would allow the noise board and nuclear free zone committees. We would not open them for new applicants, that we would open them for reappointments only.
Okay.
So that's what we did. We did not open, they are not currently open for new members at this time until the council makes a final decision on their, on whether they will continue or not in the long term.
That is my recollection as well. So Councilmember Kovar, if you have someone that is interested in that committee, we may want to encourage them to consider volunteering for the sustainable banking task force, because that task force will tackle, while their emphasis would be on financing, there's some aspects of, the nuclear code, the nuclear free committee code and aspects that are there that they will definitely be able to talk about as well. So if you have folks that are interested, we could steer them in that direction for the time being until we're ready to make a decision about the nuclear free committee and reopen it up for new appointments.
Okay, I didn't have someone specifically in mind. I just wanted to get that clarity on what we had decided with respect to that. So this makes sense why there's 3 names there. So, and then the last thing is, and the city clerk had sent some information on this, would it be possible before we, I don't know when we're expecting to vote on this list, but it would be helpful to get the ward geography and other data breakdown of the recommended appointees for each of the committees. And I think I've seen some information that gave the total, that breakdown for the entire group of people who applied. But I think it'll be instructive to see the ward membership and the other data that we're looking at in terms of diversity and so on for the recommended, at this point, I guess it's recommended for the 4 commissions. So I think it would just be helpful to have that data. And I think overall, we have 18,000 people, so 180 would be 1%. So we got, substantially more than 0.5% of the population to apply for something, which I think is pretty impressive, actually. So thanks again.
Okay. Did the city clerk have another point?
Yeah, just quickly. In fact, I sent an email to the council just at the beginning of the meeting and have actually posted with the agenda item the demographic information. And I put it together pretty quickly, really just before the meeting. So I will double check that and have it with some more clarity for next time, but it is posted and I did email it to council.
I thank you for that. I thought in trying to look at that while I'm listening very carefully to the meeting tonight, so I may have been distracted, but that covered that data for the entire group of people who had applied. And what I'm talking about would be just for the ones who are being recommended to be appointed. And maybe I'm wrong, but that's what it looks
Well,
like to me, so.
you may be right. So I will make sure you have what you need.
Great, thanks.
Councilmember Cover, I just also want to note, because it's easy to miss, that the spreadsheet that Ms. Carpenter sent has tabs, and it does on each of the tabs, but not on the main list. It has the breakdown for different people in terms of their ward and their first and their second choice, those sorts of things.
I 100% that's there, and I looked through it, but I defy anyone to look through that spreadsheet and then say, oh, this is the breakdown of the 7 people they've picked for Commission X. You can't do it by looking through that. It's very, very detailed, and it's really great information, but it would be nice just to have separately, of the 7, here's the breakdown, of this 7, here's the breakdown. That's what I'm talking about, separate from that. So, thank you.
Great. So I'm seeing no other hands. And so if people want to look at that information, we will have a resolution coming to us next week with these appointments. So if there is any concerns or questions regarding someone, either please raise it tonight or send a note to the city clerk if you need further clarification. And we'll work through the city clerk as we prepare for this voting item for next week. I just want to extend my thanks to the subgroup. There was a lot to go through really quickly. There still is a lot more. And I really appreciate you all considering the applicants, and to all the applicants, just want to say thank you. And if for some reason you were not appointed to your first choice or appointed, one of the things that we really are looking at is, and the reason we wanted to do this all together for all the committees all at once, even though it's a lot of work all at once, is thinking about the mix of people on a committee and the skills that different people bring, and making sure that it's reflective of the diversity of our community. And so we hope that if you weren't selected, that you will apply again in the future, or serve on a task force or some other way. But we just want to thank everyone for putting in an application. So I think with that, unless anyone has any other business, we will adjourn for the evening. And I just want to note that some minutes from prior meetings did go out yesterday, I want to say, and the city clerk will be sending out more. We will be voting on those next week. Okay, great. All right. Before 10 o'clock, not bad. Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.